our humanity, and our humanity tends to really get stuck in that trance of unworthiness. It's that ongoing feeling of not enoughness. It makes it impossible almost for us to trust that we are loved, that we are lovable, and that we can love fully without being hurt. Um, we sometimes have this narrative in our minds that if other people really discover the truth about who we are, they will reject us if they find out we're not perfect for some reason. So we tend to stay disconnected and withdrawn from others and from ourselves. So how do we get out of this trance of unworthiness? Through radical acceptance. And we talked about this last week as it being really an inner process of fully accepting our actual present moment inner experience. This is not an accepting what's going on outside of us. And we talked about how often we use this as a spiritual bypass. We think acceptance means we just let what's going on outside of us go on, and we say it's in divine order. No, radical acceptance is about an inner work in an inner process, because when we don't accept what's going on inside of us, then we don't have the beginnings of that pathway for healing, for inner transformation, for inner liberation, which then clears our way and keeps us grounded to do the outer work. The radical acceptance sort of has two components to it: mindfulness and compassion. And last week we talked about mindfulness being that moment to moment awareness of what's going on inside of us. And the only way we get to do that is by engaging in the sacred pause. The sacred pause. Whenever we feel what's going on inside of us as anything less than joy, peace, contentment, and even in those moments, we take a pause, and it pulls us out of the usual routine we have of being overly busy and distracting ourselves from anxiety and pain, and allows us to befriend our shadow, if you will. And the other part of radical acceptance, which um, I'll talk about more as we go on, is compassion, which is the ability and the capacity to relate to ourselves and others with tenderness and with sympathy. So remember, the undercurrent here is the saying yes to whatever is happening to us internally as the first stage, the not resisting what's coming up, not resisting the fear. In new thought and a lot of mindfulness circles, there's this idea that fear is a bad thing, and we have to overcome fear, or fears to be we have to learn how to not feel fear. Well, we are always going to feel fear, because as humans, that's how we are wired. Fear leads, and is helpful when there is a legitimate danger in our lives, like our actual bodies are at risk. And when that happens, we have that fight, fleet, freeze response. And um, but Tara Brach, the author of the book Radical Acceptance, defines a fear in a very profound way that I love, and this is the only way I define it now. Fear is the anticipation of future pain. Fear is the anticipation of future pain. And I don't know about you, but I've spent much of my life doing my utmost best to avoid pain. The problem is often that pain is not real yet. It's imagined. That's what she said, is future pain. We imagine that some experience, some action is going to hurt. So we kind of get proactive about avoiding the pain, and we say no thank you. We skip it. We do whatever we can to avoid that. the problem is, more often than not, there really is no threat. There's no physical threat to our body. We just imagine that there might be, and it's based on past experiences. It's based on what we are told might happen because of what happened to other people. It's really a misuse of the power of our imagination. If you've been in Unity for more than 5 minutes, you've undoubtedly heard about the 12 powers, imagination being one of them. But when we start to imagine um, the pain that might come in the future, and we start to worry about it, and it affects our judgment, that's misusing our power of imagination. And it's that fear ultimately boils down to a fear of separation. Fear of separation is what lies beneath all other fears. Separation from something we think is essential to our life, or people that are essential to our life. That's kind of the bottom of everything. And part of our work in radical acceptance is is to realize that when that fear comes up, it's about imagined pain, and to realize that pain itself is part of our life journey. We can't avoid pain. Pain is inevitable, but the suffering that comes from pain or imagined pain, that is entirely optional. And radical acceptance is what gets us on that pathway to remembering that it's optional and realizing what our options are. Pain is not a bad thing, it's just pain. um, we assign the idea that pain is wrong and needs to be avoided, right? I like to say that we humans are meaning making machines, and we don't like discomfort, and therefore we've assigned the meaning of pain as something is wrong and to be avoided. A lot of it has to do with the close association that we have with it when we lose things. We've all had losses in our life. We've lost people we loved. We've lost places we've loved. We've lost pets we've loved. We've lost abilities that we've loved. Loss is a natural part of life. And when we lose, because of the pain we feel from the separation of the thing we've lost, we do our best to not want to feel that pain again, and we react to it. With confusion, with closing ourselves off, and then when we think it might happen again in other situations, again, that's fear, the anticipation of future pain, and we allow that fear then to not to take us away from ourselves, to take us away from the whatever we're feeling in the moment. um, and therefore we get stuck in this trance of both unworthiness and of fear itself. But there's a path out, and that path again is when we pause and recognize what's happening within us, recognize that there's fear, recognize that we have imagined a scenario of pain coming in the future, and we're doing our best to deny what we're feeling, to deny the reality of what we're feeling, and no longer fully open and present to what's before us. But there's refuge from fear, and we can find that sense of safety, sort of, in belonging with others, but that true safety and freedom and refuge from fear is lies within us. As you know, we constantly hear in terms of spiritual practice, and in New Thought circles, it begins within us. And the Buddha speaks to three fundamental refuges from fear: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Now, when we speak of the Buddha, we're speaking of our own awakened nature. We're not speaking of the personhood of the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. We're not talking about a personhood. The Buddha is our own awakened nature. In unity, we can think of it as our Christ nature, or divinity, the ultimate true essence of light that we are, which is beyond fear. And when we can do the work to first be present to the fear and get under what's there and return to our awakened nature, then we can develop that ability and hold everything in love. Even though we know the pain will be there, we can still hold that in love as well. So our awakened nature, the Buddha, and again, the pause is what begins to get us to return there. Because if we don't pause, again, we get caught up in that cycle of what can I do to avoid the pain at all costs. We forget about our awakened nature. The second fundamental refuge is called the Dharma, and the Dharma is um, loosely translated as the path, or the way. It's the way of how things are, the law of nature. And it's really a collection of teachings in Buddhist philosophy that is help reveal the truth of ourselves and all that is around us, teachings and practices. Excuse me. So it's not like a rigid set of rules we follow. It's just principles and, again, practices to help us awaken from this trance of fear and the trance of unworthiness, and remember our Buddha, our awakened nature. Then the third refuge from fear is found in the Sangha, the spiritual community. These are the connections we make, the people we make in our lives that are together on this path of awakening with us. All these, I was going to say all these faces on the screen, but faces and names, because most of us have our cameras off. All these faces and names on the screen. This is your Sangha, right? Anyone who is a refuge of safety, comfort, and love in your life is your Sangha. And it's through these folks, these individuals, these connections as well, that help remind you of not just who you are, but they help you to step back from the fear and back into holding things in love. I've often said that the only real currency in life are the connections that we have with other people. There's a really good friend of mine who used to run a ministry in an inner city that caters specifically to supporting individuals who were homeless. And he always used to say the answer to homelessness is in relationships. Because when you think about it, if any one of us on this call right now, I'm going to make an assumption, any one of this on this call right now, if the house we lived in was suddenly burnt down for some reason, or there was some weird digital mishap and suddenly our bank account was at zero, if and we had no place to live, no place to go, we could call up at least two or three people who would say to us, yeah, you can use the guest room, yes, you can sleep on the couch, here's some money that I can help you out with. We have these relationships, we have these connections, and therefore we will be safe. And remembering that is what helps us not get sucked into the trance of fear, of worry. I'm currently experimenting with that in an extreme way. I'm coming to you from San Diego right now. Sorry, LA. I'm in LA. I've been traveling to so many places I've forgotten where I am. I'm in LA right now, and part of the last few months has been really, again, me um, engaging myself in true Sangha. I currently am intentionally a nomad. I don't have my own place to live. That's by design. I'm leaning into the friendships and the relationships and the connections I've made over the years, and prioritizing um, joy and pleasure, and affirming these connections. And I'm traveling all over the country, and visiting people and staying with people, people I've known for years, people I've just met. It's truly the idea of um, um, relying on beloved community to support me. as well. And it's interesting the fears that it is bringing up, fears of not just attachment, but fears of going against that um, both human but specifically Western and American narrative of rugged individualism, right? We got to be able to make it on our own, suffice, on our own. Sure, we may have friends and community that we can turn to, but just in case none of them show up for us, we still have to be able to make it on our own. And our interdependence sort of becomes a pseudo interdependence. So I'm leaning fully into the fullness of it. And once again, prioritizing uh, the things that and connections that bring me pleasure over work and toil and labor, which by the way is an exercise in how we subvert uh, things like systemic racism, right? Because when we look at the narrative that capitalism has put in us, and we were actually talking about this a little before service started. Cheryl and C, we were talking about how off so many times the narrative is that we work, we work, we work, we work, and then after we retire towards the end of our life, then maybe we have some time to enjoy the fruits of our labor, right? But before then, the priority is work, toil, labor, grind, and that supports a capitalist system that was started in the days of colonialism, days of slavery. And what if we were to subvert that? What if we were to prioritize not work, but even every single day of our lives, no matter how old we are, we prioritize joy and pleasure, and then added work to the mix? What would that be like? How many of you just feel anxious hearing that? Right? Because we have all these attachments. We define our worth and our worthiness through our work and our productivity. So to subvert that means that we have to notice, first of all, if that's the life we truly want to live. If we feel anxious about that, again, remember last week we talked about this being an embodied experience. Notice the anxiety, notice the tension, notice what we push against, and pause into that. Don't rush from the feeling, but pause into it, and then go deeper. Lean into the fear and the anxiety that comes up, not away from it. Because when we talk about refuge from fear, we're not talking about avoiding it, we're not talking about hiding it from the fear. Refuge is not to hide. Refuge is to find that place of comfort and safety, so then we can lean into what's happening within us. So leaning into the fear, accepting the fear, is at the center of radical acceptance. It's at the center of our awakening. It doesn't mean we get lost in the fear, but it means we create a new pattern of inviting and what we usually resist, or moving towards what we usually resist. In unity we have that saying, what we resist persists. So therefore, let's not push back against anything at all. So what that really means, though, we're talking about thoughts in our consciousness when we say what we resist persists, right? So it's like that idea of, if I were to say to you, don't think of a pink elephant. Whatever you do, don't think of a pink elephant. Don't bring a pink elephant to mind. Don't ever think about elephants or anything pink. Don't even bring those together. Like, the more you try not to think of a pink elephant, that's all you think about, right? So we're referring to our thoughts. So what often happens is we have these thoughts around fear, around the anticipation of future pain, around what we can do to avoid it. And as much as we try to ignore those fear generating thoughts, the more they are in our head, and they can paralyze us. It can make us make some choices that are not grounded in love. So the idea is not to resist, but rather to lean in, but lean in with an open heart of acceptance. Lean in with realizing that when we accept the experience that we are fully in, again, internally, if that may be fair, so be it. If we accept that we're there, then lean into it, then we can begin to really understand what's at the root of it, what's under it. Remember, the word radical comes from the root word of radical, means to get under, to get to the source. Okay, so how do we lean into the fear? First of all, notice, and again, from the pause. We pause first, always, but then we begin to notice what are the narratives and the stories that we've created around not just fear, but around this specific example, and what we think might happen. And once we create those narratives, then again, pause and really drop into the body and the feelings, and connect with what's happening within us, and allow those sensations in the body and the feelings that arise to lead us deeper, to keep leading us deeper into what the source of the pain may be. And for many of us, it's that original abandonment, that realization of we were heard, whether it was a parental figure or a caretaker, that first moment that it seemed that we felt less than love from them, that very first initial abandonment. um, it could be the time when our first profound emotional romantic love relationship ended. It could be the time when we suffered some imaginable abuse. There are these pivotal moments in our lives that felt and taught us that there's horror in the world. And again, these are all relative to each and every one of us. Let's not get in the habit of comparing or sad stories, comparing our traumas. That leads us nowhere. But whatever it is for us, that is underneath it all, whenever that is triggered or touched upon, that's what triggers the fear, because we anticipate experiencing that again. So the journey is to lean in to when we are triggered, to when we feel that anxiety, when we feel that resistance within us, to pause and lean into it, and see where it takes us. And that's a lot of the mindfulness, is being aware of what's happening. And then when we can lean into it, and I'll talk more about compassion next week, but when we begin to lean into it, and realize what the original source of our injury is, then we can then begin to do the work to compassionately love ourselves because of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that next week. But part of the leaning into fear is realizing that it's only when we lean into it that we can begin to experience freedom from it. We can begin to experience true liberation. And I make the distinction between freedom and liberation, because freedom is the idea of not being controlled by something. That's how I interpret freedom loosely. Not being controlled by something external or even internal. Um, but liberation, true liberation, is the removal of all the obstacles and injustices that exist both within us and in the world. So we could still have those obstacles within us and be mindful enough to not be controlled by them, but the actual making peace with and removal of them, of the injustices, that's true liberation. That's true freedom. In addition to the freedom, in our anti-racist work, we talk about decolonizing ourselves. We talk about noticing how we've internalized a lot of norms that go against the true divine love that we are. that are based in racism, and then when we decolonize them from ourselves, then we can truly begin the work of decolonizing them outside of ourselves. This is why I always say, anti-racism work is spiritual work, because we can't be in action outside of ourselves in an anti-racist way and expect things to change outside of ourselves if we don't do the internal work and change ourselves. And in so many ways we internalize these things and don't even know that we have. And sometimes what happens is we feel anxiety and fear just at the prospect of leaning in to do that work, right? Some of you might be familiar with the term white fragility. It's that sense of anxiety that arises within you if you're a white-bodied individual by about even just talking about racism, about hearing the word, and anything that has to do with white supremacy, homophobia, sexism, misogyny. You know, I'll speak for myself as a man, and to any of the other men on this call today. Trust me, we have internalized many qualities of sexism and misogyny. We don't even know it, and it shows up in such subtle ways sometimes. And we think we're these strident feminists, and more often than not, we perpetuate that harm. And many women also internalize some of those sexist qualities as well. And the example I can think of, that often still boggles my mind is, in our two previous presidential elections here in the United States, when President Trump won, he won the vote of white suburban women, even though his sexism and misogyny was very apparent, right? But when many women were interviewed and asked why they voted for him, many women said, "We don't believe a woman," which was Hillary Clinton at the time, "we don't believe a woman should be president." Right? So that internalized misogyny made its way out. So the only way we bring about true external liberation in this world, true long lasting change, is by, again, decolonizing ourselves of those internal things, which means leaning into the fear of even looking at them to begin with, looking into the fear of admitting that we've internalized these things and that we perpetuate them. And it's kind of scary to think that, because everyone here on this call, we believe that as divine beings we are grounded and centered in love, which is true. What is also true is that as human beings we've internalized so many narratives and beliefs, and allow fear to do its work in us, and therefore we don't live as we would expect divine beings to live. And I think we can all, if we're honest, attest to that in some way. So the journey of radical acceptance allows us to lean into that and truly begin to do the work of healing the deepest wounds that we do our best to avoid being triggered and feeling that pain. Remember, that's what fear is, the anticipation of future pain. So I have the assignment for you this week. Yes, there's homework. The assignment is to add to what we did last week. Is, we asked, the invitation was to notice when we were in situations where there was anxiety, or we felt ourselves in a trance of unworthiness to simply pause. So your assignment this week now is in the pause, to begin to lean in and ask yourself simple questions. What is the story around this fear that I've generated? Maybe what's the original wound under that story? Is there a wound, or have I just absorbed a narrative because of my culture, because of how other people have suffered? Am I willing to challenge that narrative that is within me? And am I willing to go even deeper to what's under that narrative? And then am I even beginning to be willing to lean into the opportunity that can bring more pain, remembering that pain is just pain, and the meaning that it has for our lives is what we assign to it. I have complete faith in you, and I know that taking baby steps, this is the journey we come to. I've walked it. Many others I know have walked it, and as a result, it allows me to live fully, open-heartedly, wholeheartedly, making connections, deep connections with people that I may not ever see again in my whole life, or experiences I know I won't relive, or losses that come my way, and to be fully present to them, knowing that loss and gain are both elements of living a full, fulfilled life, living as divine, which transcends time, which transcends space, which transcends attachments and ownership, because it is in and part of everything, and everything is in and part of it. This is who we are. And when we can lean into that and live that beyond the fear, beyond the unworthiness, that means we're living from that place of full acceptance of who we are and our journey. All right, let's meditate on this for a little bit. So if you're comfortable, I invite you to center yourself in this moment, in this space. If you're comfortable closing the eyes, do so. If you're not, just find a spot a little in front of you and just have a relaxed gaze on it, and simply breathe, and notice in this moment what is happening within you. Breathe and notice every moment of tension, and yes, every moment of relaxation and comfort as well. Be grateful for them both. And if you notice any moments of tension, just pause with those places. Pause with the anxieties beneath them. Pause with the fear that's been activated. And begin to notice the story, the narrative that surrounds the fear. And lean into the discomfort. And breathe. And know that beneath the fear, the anticipation of pain, beneath the discomfort, lies the beginning of healing. The beginning of fully accepting who we are, all of who we are. To reject any part of ourselves is to reject the fullness of who we are as expressions of divinity. True healing is full acceptance of our healed parts, of our wounded parts. So let today be the day where we say yes to fully accepting all that we are experiencing within. And let us say yes to true healing. Let us rest for a few moments in the silence. And so it is, and so we let it be. Amen and amen. And thank you.